All right, you guys. This morning I have a very, very special guest with us. Heather Khym is the co host of the internationally popular Abiding Together podcast. She and her husband Jake are the co founders of Life Restoration Ministries, where she serves as director of vision and ministry of the British Columbia based apostolate. She has more than 25 years of experience as a speaker and retreat leader, offering workshops and conferences in the United States and Canada. She attended Franciscan University of Steubenville, studying theology and catechetics. Heather is passionate about evangelization, discipleship, and creating an environment for people to have a personal encounter with God. She lives with her husband and her three teenage children in British Columbia, Canada. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me. It's
It
great to be with
is
you.
such an honor for you to be here. I am a huge fan of the podcast. There's only a couple podcasts I listen to, and that is my favorite one. I get so excited when I would see a new episode pop up. And if I understand correctly, you guys are coming back
We are. Yes, we
to
will. We don't have
break.
we don't
And
have the date yet, but we will be back. We will be back soon. Yeah,
I
excited about that.
cannot tell you how excited I am about that. And I'm so thankful to God that He has that plan for you guys because you touch so many people. It's the having the three of you together, I feel like it's such a gift because there's something about each of you that I just relate to, and I hear something new every time about being a woman or a wife or a mother or a friend, and it's a gift. So I'm really excited. So if you guys don't listen to the Abiding Together podcast, be sure and subscribe, follow, all the things. So when they do drop their next episode, you will hear it and it'll give you some time to go back and catch up on what you've missed.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that very much. Yeah. So
Oh,
it's a all those things just feel like a gift given by God, and we're just grateful to be a part of whatever he's doing with that. It's
right?
very, very powerful. Yeah.
It is. It really is. And I want to say thank you for your vulnerability. I think I had a friend a long time ago give me this quote that said, when we share our stories, we set someone else free. And I think it's so true. When we are willing to take the first step into that vulnerability, then we just open up the whole room for someone else to share their heart safely. And
Mhm.
that's a special thing. It's a very special thing.
Yeah, that's part of the hope in
It
why
is.
we bare our hearts to everybody is just yeah, it's so important that we are able to be vulnerable before God and before especially before a few people. You know, our vulnerability on the podcast obviously is coming from places that we've journeyed with the Lord where he's been healing and moving and restoring, so we're able to share that, in a safe manner with people. But of course, there's always other places that no one will ever know that we're all on
Right.
our own journey right now as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but you're right. I mean, vulnerability opens the door for other people to be vulnerable, and I think that's a key thing to know about relationships and how to go deep is, like, be willing to be vulnerable and
Yeah.
welcome that from other people, so,
It's
yeah.
so true. It's so true. And there's nothing more beautiful than women being vulnerable with each other because I think we probably all have stories of times that we've been hurt or disappointed or anything with our relationships with women. And when we can take that first step and invite someone else in with us, it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Beautiful thing. Well, I cannot wait to hear um, what saint has come alongside of you that you've tripped over that you want to share with us.
Yeah, so my saint is a pretty obvious one, she's so popular, and it's Saint Therese, the little flower, and, so many people that I talk to just have a love for Saint Therese. She was so young, I think she was 23 when she died or 24, somewhere around there, and, uh, it's amazing how she has sort of, like, just woven her way into a lot of people's lives, and for someone whose whole path was littleness, she ended up being a pretty great saint. And by great, I mean big, like big impact, very well known. And so, yeah, I feel incredibly grateful that she's come into my life. And the first way that that happened was I was on a ministry team. It was like a traveling evangelization team after I graduated from high school. And I was in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, and I was staying at some random person's house, as you do when you're on those teams. And this woman was so kind, and she had this deep devotion to Saint Therese. So I kept seeing all these little things around her house, and so I was asking her, "Who is this saint?" Like I've never even seen her. I had never heard about her. I think I was probably 18 years old at the time. And she said, "Oh, this is Saint Therese," and she told me just a little bit of her story. And I was like, "Wow, she sounds amazing. Like how can I find out more about her?" And she just said, "Well, if Saint Therese wants to be in your life, you don't need to find her. She'll find you." And I was like, "Oh,
Whoa.
okay. I thought
Okay.
you were just gonna like recommend a book or something, but okay. This sounds like a little bit more of an adventure, you know?" So so I left her place, and then all of a sudden Therese was everywhere. Like I just saw her everywhere. And so it was like at the bookstore, at a thing. It's just like she was just all of a sudden, I don't know, it's like I'd never seen her up until that point. And then she was everywhere I went. And so I just started this little relationship with Therese where I would just talk to her sometimes. And I remember being about 19, and I was praying, and I was just like, "Therese, I just want to pray for whoever my future spouse was." I know a lot of people do that, but that really wasn't my style. Like I'm not that kind of girl to be like, "Oh, my future spouse." Like it never actually even crossed my mind until that moment. And I just said, like, especially if he's far away from God right now, I just ask that you begin to pray for his conversion and pray that God would draw close to him. And and so interestingly enough, when I met my husband Jake, we did like a timeline thing about what was going on like before we met. Like what were you doing when I was doing this? What were you doing, at this point? And and I told him about that, and he said, "When was that?" And so I told him, the year, the month that I prayed this, and he said, "That's crazy because at that point," he said, "I was actually really far from God, but I was starting to like intellectually seek him. So I was starting to read some things, but I had massive areas of sin in my life." And he said, "And at that point, I went on a retreat, and it was like an 8-day silent retreat. And all I got from the priest was one book, and it was called I Believe in Love. And it's a personal retreat based on the writings of Saint Therese." And he said, like, she,
Oh,
through her intercession and through like what I was learning in this retreat, he said, I had my first like really powerful personal encounter with God. And I was like, "Oh, Therese, look at you just
look
slipping
at
in there." Like,
you.
no, I think sometimes we think we're just, I don't know, talking to the clouds or talking to the sky. And then there's these moments where it's revealed that no, we're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses that is there to help us along the way and to journey
Yeah,
along the way. And so I think my initial experiences with Therese, though, before I knew some of those things, I was like, kind of immature and just like, "Oh yeah, she gives roses to people as a sign, and that's cool. No, I'm just gonna pray for that, and I'm gonna," I was kind of seeking the kind of the signs and wonders side of things.
absolutely. Yep.
And in my, youthful zeal, like, that seemed to work for me at that point, and little did I know she was actually deeply interceding for things
Yeah.
that were gonna be super important in my life later on. Attached to that prayer, I also said to her, "Therese, also just give me a sign to know that he's the one when
Yeah.
it's the right one." And I never shared that with anyone. That was just like a little prayer that I had offered to her. And so when I met my husband Jake, at the time we were dating and whatever, and the day that we got engaged was actually her feast day. And he said when he was proposing, he said, "I chose this day um, because Saint Therese was just on my heart as a part of our story." And I was like, "That's interesting." I'm listening to him and I'm like, we hadn't talked about anything yet, about the
Oh my
timelining, about
goodness.
anything like that. And then he said, "And these roses here are for you from her." And he had this beautiful bouquet of roses that was sitting underneath the tabernacle of this church this little chapel that we were in. And so, Therese says, I will send roses from heaven, like as a sign, like, as an answer to prayers. And so that was just like the little tip of the hat, like, as I had said, "Saint Therese, let me know if he's the one." And there were these roses that were right there, in that moment, and, so, yeah, she keeps coming through, like, in all these various ways, and I would say as I've grown in my relationship with her, the roses, the all the shine, the signs and wonders, like, those things have faded away, and what I've been drawn to the most in the last several years has been the little way. This is her way, is that it's the little way of love, and she had this disposition that was so she knew that she wasn't big enough, that she wasn't great enough, that she
Yeah.
wasn't smart enough, strong enough, holy enough, to be a great saint, yet she had this desire to be a saint. And she said, "I know what I'll do. I'll just stop trying. I'll just basically stop trying and relying on all my own strength, and I'll just throw myself into the arms of Jesus, and it'll be like instead of me, like, trying to crawl up these stairs, it'll be like an elevator, and he will be the one that will lift me up into heaven and to be a saint." And I think in my own story, I come from a long history of being self-reliant, and a lot of that comes from very painful places and traumatic places where you have to, step into some roles that maybe you didn't want to or were never meant for you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the last decade that I was really brought to my knees and in a very dependent place upon God. And that felt like at the time, it was the worst thing because I was so used to being the strong one or what, whatever you
Right,
wanna
right.
do. It's sort of funny to me now, but, um, and to be weak was like the worst, it seemed like a failure. It seemed like I was, um declining in my progress of holiness or
Yes.
relationship with God or my abilities or whatever it was, and I just found myself literally physically, emotionally, mentally just, like, flat on my back, and, um, and that's where I met Therese again. She just keeps coming in these little ways, like, to accompany me, and I started to realize this is exactly where she was internally. This was her disposition of, like, "I have nothing, and Jesus is everything." And I'm just gonna like joyfully submit to his greatness because I'm so little and so unable to do anything without his power, without his grace, without his strength, without his presence, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is just like taking me right where I am," which was in this very tiny place and giving me the courage to welcome it and to actually see it as, no, this is the preferred place. Oh, this
Yes,
is what Jesus means when he's like, come to me as a little child,
yes.
like it's the children of God that will inherit the kingdom. Like all of those things just started to make sense because I was looking at it now through the lens of the littleness of Therese
Yeah,
and that her pathway, which Mother Teresa adopted and many other people have adopted in their spirituality, um, that's actually the key is to be as small as possible so that we can depend, rely on God who is so big and capable and who wants to be the strength in our weakness and
yeah,
who wants to be the one to intervene, who wants to be our savior and not us saving ourselves. So she's been an incredible witness to me of this littleness. And I was just listening to a priest talking about the end of her life. And he said, for Therese, for most of her, 23 years of life, it was easy for her to believe in God. She just had this gift of faith until the last 9 months of her life, and then it just went totally silent. And he said, and even then when she had nothing, there was no feeling attached to it, it was just complete darkness, like a dark night of the soul almost for her, that even then she believed so strongly that she would pin the creed, like, to her chest, like, over her heart, and just say, "I believe this. I believe this." Like, even in the midst of not having any, um, consolation in the journey, that
mhm.
she still believed it, and those are places that I think we all can relate to, these places of, like, doubt or darkness or, places where we're just struggling, and to activate our will and our belief, like, our
Yeah,
faith, like, so strongly that it's gonna go far beyond all of those things. And she never left his side, and that's what's such a witness to me right now is, like, no matter what suffering she went through, both physical suffering and then the spiritual darkness that she entered into, she never left his side, and And that's the kind of Christian that I wanna be, the one that never leaves, the one that and we all say we won't, but we do. We
Yeah.
do in all these little ways, and that's just on my mind. I'm like, "Jesus, I don't wanna leave. I want my relationship with you to actually be a covenant, like a marriage, like I'm not gonna ditch out on my vows to Jake, and how flippantly do I sometimes ditch out on my vow to you? And have I seen it like that, that I've actually made a vow to you, you know?
Yeah.
So Therese is still this great model for me in so many ways. Like I'm learning so much from this little saint who barely lived, I've lived double her life almost. And and I'm still learning from her. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface and I've been journeying with her for quite some time now. And then so beautifully this gift, Father Josh Johnson is a friend of ours and he came into town one time and we were talking about our love for Saint Therese. It just came up one time. And then a couple weeks later in the mail, I got this gift and it's this relic of her hair that he sent to us. And so now Therese is literally we've tripped over her again, but she's right in our home.
Oh
And
my goodness. What a gift.
first of all, who gives away a gift like that? I mean, that just says something about Father Josh that he was so
Yes.
detached and willing to bless us with a gift that he will never understand what he
Yes.
actually gave to us. But also in our ministry, we have so many retreats that we put on and events, and we always have Therese there, for other people to be able to encounter her. So I just feel like she's been such a gift in our life. I don't know how to express my gratitude for her, uh, and what a great teacher she is, but also a great friend and a great companion
Yes.
that she's been. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love all this. Saint Therese is so special, and I love that you went to Steubenville, and I have some other dear friends that went to Steubenville, and they're very, very close to her, and so it just makes me wonder, is she just does she have a special home there too? Because I feel like people that attend that college just they meet her in the most beautiful ways.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
it's a similar, spirit to Saint Francis. Like
Oh,
Saint
that's
Francis was
true.
just the simplicity of his
Yes.
life, the reckless abandonment to the will of God, and yeah, so I think they have some similarities there.
Oh, it's so true. I love that idea of becoming like a child and becoming simple, and how you talked about that she just keeps encountering us, and I really do think that like, when I think of saints, so as a college convert, I think of like this I'm gonna have to talk to them a lot, or I'm gonna have to ask them a lot to, intercede for us or whatever. But I feel like they are right there as soon as we start talking to them. My 11-year-old, he just started getting really interested in Blessed Carlo Acutis. I don't
Hmm.
know if I said his last name right. But and I feel like just in the last week he's everywhere. Like
Hmm.
he's all over the place. And then we woke up this morning and it's his day, and so we were talking about that, and I don't know. I love how they're right there, and it doesn't take much for them to be like, "Hey, I have been trying to get your attention,
Hmm.
and I'm really excited to pray for you on this journey." I'm really, really excited
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, and I think, one of the tendencies we can fall into with in regards to saints is that we treat them like there's some sort of drive-through, um, McDonald's worker where it's like, can
Yes.
I just drive through and ask you for what I want and then you give it to me and then
And
I
I'd
drive
like to go
away.
ahead and get the large size. That'd be great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so when they don't come through, we're just like, whatever, and then we
Yeah.
ditch out. And I think, it's just the wrong perspective, and maybe we haven't been taught properly of how to
Yes.
approach the saints, that they're people, just like you and me, and
Ah,
that there's relationship that's available to us, that
mhm.
they aren't just people to, ask for things, but actually a relationship to be had there.
Yeah.
Someone to accompany us in the places. So, every marriage has a patron saint and like a guardian angel that's given to the marriage, each individual, so there's saints and angels that are appointed to us. And I
Yeah.
think it's important that we actually open the door to see who's there
So
waiting for us.
if a couple wanted to know who their patron saint for their marriage was, or if an individual wanted to know, who is it? Who is my saint? Do you have any advice for um, just how to start that process and how to open yourself rightly, not to, the drive-through, but to the relationship?
Well, I think there's two different ways. One is this concept that you're talking about on this podcast, which is you just sort of trip over them. Like Saint Therese came into Jake and I's life. She
Yeah.
initiated this. We didn't initiate it with her.
Yeah.
She was the one who was sort of working in the background when we didn't even know it. So I think that's one way. But another way is like we choose a confirmation saint. That's a process we go through where we read stories and there's certain saints that we're drawn to, and that's why we choose them as our confirmation saints. So I think it can be both. And I obviously it just starts with praying. Like, God, is there
Mm,
someone that you want to send to us, that you want us to
yeah.
draw near to? Um and it's not just for married couples. I mean, this would be at any stage of life and any vocation. I think that there's just saints that want to be our friends. It's not exclusive to certain vocational calls.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the point is to notice that there are specific saints that want to accompany us, and they have different things that they want to share with us. And our approach should be less of like a utilitarian, like I just want to get something from you, and more of a I actually want to be a student of you, and I want to sit at your feet, and I want to learn. Like, how did you become
Yeah.
so close to God?
Yes, yes. That's so beautiful.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. I have so enjoyed hearing all about Saint Therese this morning and your journey with her, and thank you for sharing that with us. You're right, she is so incredible, and, so if you guys don't know about her, just take some time and just look her up, Google her, and see, read about her life and about what she went through and what there is that you can relate to with her. Um, and before we go, I want to tell y'all one other thing about Heather. She wrote this amazing book, Abide. I don't know why I'm holding it up. I'm holding it up for the camera, even though this is the podcast. But um, so as I've been reading it, I think two things. Heather, you talk about the fog, and if you don't know where you started and you don't know where you're going, it's hard to know how to do the middle, and that our life is this middle. And I love that because I think I thought about the middle as like, it's always going to be a certain circumstance, a certain moment, but it's like, well, no, the middle really is just this whole journey of life that we're on. And we were created by him, and we are to return to him. And this middle is that journey in between of how to do that. And I don't know, that was just so beautiful. I probably just completely paraphrased that wrong, but
No, that's good.
it was
That's good.
I loved it. It was beautiful. That was great. And then the other thing that you guys have talked about this on the podcast and in your book, it about forgiveness. And you have such an amazing gift of encouraging and helping people to really understand the differences between forgiveness and reconciliation. And I'll never forget the first time you said that those aren't the same thing. Um, that was so powerful for me because there are times in my life when I'm like, well, I've forgiven this person. I've really put in the prayer and the work to take them to the foot of the cross and forgive them and stand there with them. But the relationship is still broken and I'm still hurting so bad. And you said something about that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same. And what a gift we have in Christ that through confession, that there is reconciliation. We have that gift, but because of sin and brokenness, we don't always get the reconciliation part with each other. And I had never heard that before. It was within the last year that I was introduced to that, and that has been a huge freedom for me,
Mhm.
um, to really do the rest of just leaving it there with God. So thank you for that very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, the hope for the book is just that it would be an ongoing accompaniment to the healing journey. That it would be something that would be a bit of a guide or lay out a pathway that can help people in practical ways, like engage the parts of their story that they want to bring before God and experience healing and that reconciliation that you're talking about. So I'm,
Yes,
I'm glad to hear that it blessed you in some way, and that's the hope, is that it does help open a new pathway for healing.
it does. It absolutely does. Well, guys, I will put a link to the book and the podcast in my show notes. That way you can go run and hear more of Heather. Heather, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Kate. Good to be with you.
Thank you.